When we take a step back and look at the long, dark adventure of human history, it is astonishing to see how flat the graphs remained for thousands of years. In that massive time span from the agricultural revolution to the 16th century, total global wealth and per capita income barely changed. Just think about it. There were no vast gulfs between the living standards of an ordinary farmer in ancient Rome and a peasant living in medieval Europe centuries later. Both were dependent on the forces of nature. Both woke with the sunrise and slept with the sunset. And for both, the hope of getting richer was practically zero. However, in the last few centuries, humanity has experienced an unprecedented rupture. That graph of prosperity and production, which had been flat for millennia, suddenly shot vertically upwards. The silhouettes of cities changed, factory smoke covered the skies, and humanity's production capacity multiplied at an unimaginable speed. Right at the heart of this massive change that reshaped the world from top to bottom, overthrowing kingdoms and replacing them with corporations, lies capitalism. But capitalism wasn't a machine that fell from the sky. It was a monumental paradigm shift within the human mind. To truly understand this system, we first need to delve into the mindset of the pre-capitalist world. In that era, people viewed the economy as a zero-sum game. Wealth was not a concept to be produced or grown through work. It was merely a fixed pie, conquered through wars and shared by the force of the sword. Since the pie never grew, the only way for a nobleman or an empire to get richer was to forcibly take someone else's slice. Capitalism completely shattered this millennia-old dogma and instilled in us the idea that wealth could be created from scratch. So, how did this stagnant pie suddenly begin to grow? This magic is hidden in a concept we all carry in our pockets today, one we take for granted, but which is actually one of the greatest inventions in human history: credit. Before capitalism, money was merely a dull, lifeless tool, used to exchange existing goods with one another. If a baker wanted to expand his business and build a new oven, he had to save money for years and hide it under his mattress. The future was uncertain, and no one trusted tomorrow. The credit mechanism, however, completely bent this perception of time. Credit means financing our future potential wealth today. With property rights secured by laws and the advent of the scientific revolution, people began to believe that tomorrow would be better than today. The baker took money he hadn't yet earned from the bank and built his oven today. He increased production, paid off his debt, and with the remaining profit, he became richer while society gained access to more bread. Credit was trust in the future converted into cash. However, for this massive machine to work fully, the moral taboos that had persisted for centuries had to be dismantled. For thousands of years, greed, self-interest, and the desire for more were seen by societies as the greatest shames and sins. That is, until 1776, when a Scottish moral philosopher named Adam Smith changed the destiny of the world with his work, The Wealth of Nations. Smith took the concept of self-interest, which had been condemned for centuries, and placed it right at the center of economic development. In that legendary book, Adam Smith said, "It is not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their own self-interest." The effort of individuals to maximize their own profit would balance the market through an invisible hand, ultimately increasing everyone's prosperity. Now, the baker had to produce the best bread at the cheapest price, not because he loved us, but to make more money. Rational selfishness had become the key to collective welfare. A rather ambitious philosophy, isn't it? The reflection of this philosophy in the physical world occurred through the radical transformation of production systems. Another crucial point Smith emphasized was the division of labor. Let's recall the famous pin factory example. In the past, an artisan would cut the wire of a pin, sharpen the tip, attach the head, and barely produce 10 pins a day. The capitalist system, however, analyzed this process and broke it down into small, simple parts. Each worker specialized in only one movement, for instance, just cutting the wire. This assembly line logic literally sent productivity through the roof. When the credit mechanism and this massive productivity boost joined forces, an enormous profit emerged. But there is a very critical distinction here. Wealth and capital are not the same thing. Ancient kings used their acquired wealth to build giant palaces, pyramids, and consume that money. The capitalist mindset, on the other hand, never turns its profit into a dead investment. It takes that profit and reinvests it into machines, technology, and production to make even more money. This endless cycle of reinvestment is the true power that ignited the spark of the Industrial Revolution as we know it. But there is another side to the coin, a rather dark side. While production and efficiency were hitting the roof, especially in 18th and 19th century England, the wheels of these giant factories were turning through the unprecedented exploitation of the working class. Millions of people, and unfortunately children, were forced to work in terrifyingly dangerous conditions, never seeing the light of day, for wages that barely kept them alive. As capital grew into a giant, the concept of labor turned into physical and psychological devastation. Man had become a mere cog in the machine. As the system developed over the years, production lines sped up so much that products far exceeding the basic needs of society began to overflow from the factories. There was a brand new existential crisis. Who was going to buy all these products and why? This is exactly where the system's new life jacket came into play: consumer culture. To absorb its massive production, capitalism had to reprogram the psychology of the masses. The advertising industry and public relations were born. They began whispering to people that they needed to buy things they didn't actually need. The concept of artificial needs settled right in the center of our lives. You were no longer buying a car just to get from point A to point B, but to prove your status to your neighbor. Capitalism had discovered the feeling of emptiness inside people and convinced the masses that the only way to fill it was to constantly purchase. Happiness had been turned into a commodity sold in shop windows. Let's admit it. Today, it is absolutely undeniable that capitalism has carried humanity's general welfare, medical technologies, food access, and average life expectancy to a historical peak. Today, an ordinary minimum wage earner can access comforts that a king in the Middle Ages could not. But we absolutely cannot ignore the potential of this same system to turn unaware individuals into consumption addicts who exist merely by purchasing and measure their worth by the brands they wear. In short, capitalism is a massive, living architecture that links our selfish interests, the time-bending credit mechanism, and capital accumulation to a global production line. Besides being the most powerful engine driving us toward innovation and financing science, it is a structure that must always be questioned due to the income inequalities it creates and the superficial consumption frenzy it drags us into. So, considering all these dynamics, what do you think about this? Looking at this long historical process and our living standards today, was the introduction of capitalism into humanity's life a good thing overall or a bad thing? Let's meet in the comments. Also, which financial crisis or economic system in history would you like us to examine in the next video? I'm waiting for your ideas below. Don't forget to subscribe to the Capital Architecture channel and like the video. See you in the next video. Take care of your investments.